if me and you had a box, and inside the box is a beetle, but I can't see your box and you can't see mine, is then your beetle the same as my beetle? People kind of use the language, and we actually name something a beetle. But since we can't check each other's box, it doesn't matter if your beetle is different to my beetle, or even if the box is empty. According to Wittgenstein, the word beetle gets its meaning from the physical creature, but it's really about how we develop language, this shared thing of language to basically summarize an experience. So what if then we replace beetle with saying, well, if me and you are both cold, we're cold outside, then is my cold the same as your cold? Or if me and my sister are out and she says it's cold, well, my cold and her cold are definitely very different things. And then you can take that to more examples of, well, are my emotions and sensations the same as yours? But it doesn't really stop there. And then you can really take this and define all things. Like, I thought about the question of what is a woman? And it's like, is my woman the same as your woman? And then we go back to what we were saying with Zach, is my red the same as your red? So essentially, we've agreed to create this world that summarizes an experience. But because our perceptions are different, we are not actually talking about the same thing a lot of the time. And then I go, well, is there ever a time we're talking about the same thing? And I say, well, yes. If me and you were to drink from the same orange juice glass and we both took a sip, then my orange juice is the same as your orange juice. So the meaning kind of comes from this shared experience of life. And rather than the kind of the public, rather than the use of how it's used in public language, because we really don't get the whole kind of picture of what that thing is. And shared practices then are what gives the word life. And I mean, and you think about it, and it's like, okay, that's what gives someone's words value. That's what gives what I say. That's when you listen. Because if I'm a good salesman and I tell you I'm a good salesman, you might kind of believe me if you know me. But if 5 people say that I'm a good salesman, then you're going to believe me way, way, way more. We want that social proof, and that's why we spoke about why the most important thing for a public speaker is a public speaker needs to have weight behind their words. They need to have the proof behind what they're saying. So I then took this and I was like, I thought about the scene in 1984 where it's my favorite scene when reading the book. The guy said, there's one of these sort of government guys who's one of the ones that's controlling people, and he says, a beautiful thing, the destruction of words. What justification is there for a word which is simply the opposite of some other word? Take good, for example. What need is there for a word like bad? Ungood would do just well. If you want a stronger word for good, use plus good or double good. In the end, the whole notion of goodness and badness would be covered by only 6 words. So that's the kind of tyrannical thing behind how we use experience and language. Because if there's two people that experience love, but there's no word for love, then how can we summarize it and help others achieve it? It's an unknown thing. It's what that woman from North Korea was saying on Rogan about how there's no word for love in North Korea. And so I then take this into more like a practical sense. And if I'm in a cafe and I think there's maybe a girl that likes me, but I never go. No, let me take that back. If I'm in a cafe and a girl likes me, but I don't go up to talking, I don't see it, I don't perceive it, and I don't know about it. Does her liking me exist? Well, you go, it doesn't exist for me, but it might do for her. So does it need to be mutually perceived to exist? And then you might say, well, no, because unconsciously, if she was to like me, then her behavior is going to change, and it's going to be different with her body language. Maybe she's going to look at me a bit more than if she didn't like me. But then what if I don't interpret that? And then, and then you might say, well, it's still having an effect on you, even if you don't interpret it. But then I'd say, well, okay, let's say you're driving and you get a speeding fine, but the post, it comes through the door, but you never open it. Well, does that exist if you don't interpret it? And I'd say, well, yes, because the longer that you don't interpret it, the more the debt builds up, and the more it manifests itself. And well, maybe you ignore it for 3 months, and then eventually one day you can't swipe your cards. So yes, maybe it does. And this is why Berkeley was wrong. So Berkeley's the philosopher that said, if a tree falls in a forest and no one perceives it, does it exist? And he thought no. There needs to be a perceiver, and that's why he was wrong. Because he believed that physical objects don't exist independently without a perception of them. And this is why, unfortunately, I was wrong about how Africa might not exist, because like, there's people perceiving it. I go to a shop and I'm eating mango that came from Africa, so it has to exist, right? But I remember with that example, I was talking to a girl in uni, and she was like, well, why did you say that in a clip? That's a bit stupid. Why did you say Africa don't exist? And then I was like to her, well, it depends what you mean by exist. And I was like, my definition of real is significant. So if 30 seconds ago this ball of air didn't exist, so 30 seconds ago this little ball of air didn't exist because you weren't thinking about it. It's only existing now because I've made it, I've manifested it. You weren't thinking about it 30 seconds ago. And then she was like, then I was like, well, I had to kind of, she was like, why didn't you say that in the video? And I was like, well, that doesn't get 350,000 views, with all that context. But okay, let's say I've never, so Africa exists because I've had mango, and that comes from Africa, so it must do. It's been perceived somewhere. But what if I've never had mango? And Africa then isn't significant, it hasn't manifested itself in my life. So if you're like one of those people in the Amish community in America that live with no technology, and the Amish is basically a community that lives with no technology, and they reject kind of like modern healthcare and things like that. Well, there's no way that Africa exists for them. So in order for existence, there has to be knowledge. And now we get to the more usefulness of this idea. Because say I want something to exist, like I want to be a millionaire, or I want to be a in-shape man. Well, I need the right knowledge to achieve that. The two are very synonymous. And that's kind of the conclusion I got to. If you want to make something real, you want to really change your reality, you need knowledge. And I guess it has to be probably like the mutually perceived thing. I'm still unsure about, but I do think if you want to make something exist, there needs to be knowledge. Yeah.
So let me try and like concretize a couple of things you've said based on my notes that I've made here, right? Language makes an attempt for us to communicate our experience to one another, right? But it never does it justice. It's never perfect. Like, by definition, you have to squeeze a concept or an experience into a word or a story. And to do that, you'll have to leave things out, right? By definition, there's limitation there. So it'll never accurately, perfectly communicate an experience to you. Does that matter, right? Does it matter, really? Because both of us, in either case, have had that experience individually and it's been meaningful to us, and we're just attempting to kind of get across an idea of what might have happened. In some cases, maybe it doesn't matter, right? If you tell me you're feeling anxious, I can't say that you don't, because that's your own individual experience of it. Same thing if I said I was anxious. If we say we're both anxious, maybe our anxiety is different. To you, it manifests in the body differently, or you describe it using different words, but we're still just making an attempt to explain to each other how we feel, and language is the mode with which we do that, but it's not perfect. And I think about, in Alan Watts' a bit about the unspeakable world, he talks about, if I tell you to imagine a leaf, right, you'll think of probably a green spearhead shaped thing with some like little sort of little crinkles in it that create like the veins or the blood vessels or whatever for the leaf, and light shines through it and all that kind of stuff, right? We have a sort of rough collective idea of what a leaf looks like, but my leaf in my head will be different to your leaf. And by using the word leaf, we get a gist of what we're both kind of trying to describe, but it's never going to be as accurate. Which is true, right? And then you talked about this bit from 1984 that basically is trying to say that if you simplify language, you simplify experience. Because if you take away, let's say, the range of, I don't know, linguistic tools that I can use to describe my experience, then you can't understand me as well. We can't connect on the same level as human beings. And that's part of how the party in that book sort of controlled people, by controlling the language they can use to digest their experience themselves and get across their experience to others and have human connection. And finally, I think what you're trying to get across with your points made at the end is that there are levels to experience. So there's first-hand experience, which is, very right hemisphere. Like, I take a sip of water from my bottle here, right? I'm doing that. And then I can explain to you that my bottle exists with the water in it and I'm drinking out of it. But like, you didn't have that first-hand experience. The bottle still exists, but to you, it's less close. It's less primary. It's a second-hand experience. And maybe, I've never been to, I've never been to Machu Picchu, but I'd love to. It's one of the great wonders of the world. I know it exists because I know people have been there, because they've used language and image to explain to me that they've been there. But it's very it's kind of further away in my field of experience. It's kind of a third-hand experience. But I know that place exists. It's less primary. It's less significant. It's less salient to me. And I guess we can choose. I want to finish with your speeding ticket example, because we can choose in some cases how close in levels we want an experience to be to us. So the speeding ticket letter comes through the door. If I don't open the letter, the speeding ticket still exists. I just haven't addressed it. The same way that if there's a problem in your relationship or in your family and you sweep it under the carpet, to use a metaphor, and don't address the resentment or the issue going on, it doesn't go away. Sometimes it builds, just in the same way that a speeding ticket fine will increase if it's not addressed.